Hello guys and welcome to another video. My name is Mark, I'm an entrepreneur and property investor, and in today's video we're talking about what you should do today in order to be rich tomorrow. And these are the sort of things that I wish somebody had told me at the beginning of my wealth creation journey. And if you like this sort of content, if you like this sort of video, please give it a big like. It helps me out with the algorithm and I really do appreciate every single like that I get. And if you haven't already subscribed, why not consider subscribing? Everything on this channel is always free. There's no course to buy, there's no upsell. It's just me giving you the information and making sure you can make informed decisions. Now, what I'm going to go through today, I have to preface with the fact that I am not a financial advisor. I would be considered considerably wealthy, however, I am not a qualified financial advisor. So take this as just an opinion and something that I would do if I was going back in time at the beginning of my journey and how I would address my wealth creation strategies. So, the first thing I think you need to do is decide on the timescale. And what we're talking about today really is about passive income and about building wealth alongside whatever business or job or anything else that you may have. And we all know that we need to create a spread between income and expenses in order to invest. But what we're going to talk about today, what options you have to invest in and what I would have been doing back in my 20s if I could go back in time and make my decisions again. Now the first thing would be to decide on my timescale, because if I want to be wealthy before 57, my strategy will differ to if I want to be wealthy after 57. Now pensions become very, very good if you want to be wealthy after 57. 57 being at the moment the cutoff age at which you can withdraw 25% of your pension pot tax-free. Now it is only 25% and everything else is taxable. And I still believe there are better options that give you more flexibility on the other side. But a pension is an option if you want to become wealthy after 57. So the first thing I would do is open a SIP. I would consider commercial property, I'd consider stocks, shares and funds, and I'd see what my employer would be able to offer me in terms of a match scheme. And then I would basically assess that against my options on the more flexible side of this arrangement, on the becoming wealthy before 57 side, because there are lots and lots of options on here that would allow you to get to the same destination quicker. Now the second thing, once I've decided on my timescale, would be decide on the sort of assets I like. Now there's some people who just don't want to get involved in property at all. That's absolutely fine. You know, stocks, shares and funds will be for them. There are people that love property and have got no interest in paper assets whatsoever. Again, absolutely fine. I just think it's really important to decide on the sort of assets that you're interested in. And I'm going to do another video about stocks and shares versus property, for example, as investment classes. The bottom line is really property carries a little bit more risk, but it's leverageable, so there's greater possible returns. And it comes back to capitalism again, right? The more risk, the more reward. And property has that leverage, so therefore more risk and more reward. On the other side, if you're doing index funds, for example, very low risk, very low effort. At the end of the day, the businesses are run on your behalf. So ultimately, it's a much lower risk, lower return kind of investment. But you're still looking at 10% on index funds on an average over a long period of time. Now we know that there'll be big years, there'll be low years, but ultimately, you know, it's 10% per year. On the property side, you can achieve much, much more because you've got this leverage working for you, but you have more risk because it could be working against you. Now the third thing that I would do is I would consider a LISA. Now if I didn't have my first property, for example, the LISA is a fantastic way to start saving up a deposit for my very first property. And the LISA, essentially, the government give you 25% bonus on anything you put into that account. Now, you have to use it either for your first property or you can withdraw everything within it after 60 completely tax-free. But it's essentially a tax-free savings account. It's got a limit of £4,000 a year and the government will give you £1,000, and you can do it either as a stocks and shares LISA or as a cash LISA. But ultimately, 25% return, absolutely fantastic way to start saving up that deposit for your very first property. So if I was just starting out and maybe I had a budget, I don't know, of £350 a month to save, well that would be the first place that I would look, because I know within 2 years I'd have a deposit saved for a property. And that would be an absolutely fantastic place to start. Now the fourth thing I would do is to open a stocks and shares ISA. Now the ISA is an individual savings allowance, and it means that anything that you accrue or that gets dividended to you within that wrapper is completely tax-free for life. Now you have an allowance on that £20,000 a year. So for me, at the moment, I'm putting in £1,666 a month in both mine and my wife's ISA, and that means that anything that accrues over our lifetime is completely tax-free. The one thing to remember though, whilst you have a £20,000 limit here, if you do take up the £4,000 here, that is inclusive, so that would only be £16,000. So make sure you bear that in mind. But the stocks and shares ISA would definitely definitely be the next place that I would look in order to have returns. Now, everybody on this channel knows I love property. Purchasing a property would have been my aim from the very outset. When I opened up my LISA, when I started deciding on options, I would straight away be looking for a property. And if we think about my first property I purchased over in Erith. It was a 3-bed, and I rented out the spare bedroom. So I didn't have enough money for a deposit for a buy-to-let, but I did have enough money for a deposit for a personal house, and I had the income that allowed me to do that. What I did was I purchased that house, I then rented out the 2 spare bedrooms, I netted nearly £1,000 a month. It meant that we had a real big jump start. And that house, we bought it for 176k back in 2010. Today it's worth 425k. We also made like a further 250 odd grand in capital appreciation. So it was a really, really good investment. But for me, if I was starting out again, pretty much everything here would be geared towards making sure that I could save that deposit for my very first property. And after that, we go on to point 5, which is refinance and repeat. So I would be refinancing those assets and repeating that process. Why would I refinance? Well, if I can borrow at 3% and I can get a return on investment at 12% or 20%, then how much should I borrow is the question I ask myself over and over again. And the answer is, of course, as much as possible. So I would personally be refinancing and repeating as quickly as I possibly could in all instances, bearing in mind risk, reward, and the fees and everything else that comes with this. But ultimately, I know that I would be refinancing, and I am on my portfolio at the moment, and I'm buying more properties all the time. The last thing on my list is to review periodically. And it's really important. We plan, we execute, and we review. So for me, it's decide on my timescale, decide on my assets, i.e. plan what I'm going to do, execute, open a LISA, open a stocks and shares ISA, buy a property, and then refinance and repeat whilst reviewing periodically. Because by reviewing periodically, we'll be able to see any errors, any risks, anything that might be changing in the environment. For example, if the interest rate changed to be 6% and the return on investment I could achieve would be 8%, well, I probably wouldn't be borrowing very much. There's only a 2% spread. And on top of that, I've got all this risk involved. Not so attractive, but at the moment with 3% and 20%, and this is basically single let and HMO, then I'm very interested in borrowing as much as I possibly can. So guys, I hope this video is interesting to you. I'm going to do another video about pensions and why I personally don't particularly like pensions, and it's because it locks it up until you're 57 years old. I want to be wealthy before that, and I think most of my viewership want to be wealthy before that. However, if you're in your 50s already, maybe the pension's the right route. You're already very close to that age, and actually you don't have to wait too long to be able to access that money. So guys, give this video a like, massively helps me out with the algorithm. I look forward to seeing you on the next one, and thank you so much for watching.